Gotta hit the start, record.
Got it. On the latest edition of The Big Show, it is MLK weekend, and we have a plethora of films opening. From Regina King's directorial debut in One Night in Miami, Nate Parker's follow-up to The Birth of a Nation, American Skin, the documentary MLK FBI, as the futuristic sci-fi film Outside the Wire. You can envision we have a full slate of films to discuss this week. Joining Charles Kirkland Jr., Wilson Morales, and myself will be CCA members TT Stern-Enzi and hopefully Kevin Sampson. We'll talk about these films and more on episode 438 of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. Let's go. All right, and welcome to the latest episode of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. I am Tim Gordon, looking suspicious, and I don't know what the heck is going on. It's Charles Kirkland Jr. Charles, what's up, my brother?
Hey, how's it going, Tim? There's a lot of stuff going on around me. So, pardon me if I glance off into the oblivion for a moment.
I can tell. You know what you look like for a second? You look like those actors who we see that do these sci-fi movies, and when they're shooting them, there's really nothing there but like a stick and a ball, and you were like, so what's up, bro? Hey man, you good?
Hey, it's been a good day so far, so I'm ready to get started and see what is in store for us today.
So I see no crutches behind you. I'm 2 weeks outside of the COVID protocol. You see me now, I got all kind of energy, like, yeah, let's get it.
I am walking around without crutches. I have a crutch just in case, but I'm doing all right. I'm limping a little bit, but I'm almost there.
All right, man. So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to do something a little different today. Normally we bring Wilson on and let Wilson kind of get into his entertainment cipher for about 10, 15 minutes, and then we bring our guest on. Man, today I'm going straight to the quick, man. We're going to bring Wilson Morales on from Black Film and TV. And in addition to that, we have another special guest who's also a member of the CCA, who's also a board member of the Film Festival Alliance, and he is also a journalist for a Fox outlet in Cincinnati. I don't know exactly. It is a Fox outlet, TT, that you're on, right?
It is Fox 19.
I was going to say Fox 19, but I didn't want to mess it up. So we have TT Stern-Enzi. This brother is like a 20-some-odd year film vet. Wilson Morales from blackfilmandtv.com. He is what we call, he has been minted, legendary, punched in the face, not smart enough to know that he shouldn't eat on camera in the middle of a show, which literally is being recorded and will be documented forever, that people have watched Wilson eat chips. I bet if you was on Variety's podcast right now, you wouldn't be eating a damn chip, Wilson Morales.
No, it was not chips. It was something that I had.
Wilson is a busy man, so he does like 2-5 things. So I can understand.
Let me tell you something, man.
Get your chew on, man. Hurry
up. Three of us on this show belong to the most exclusive film critic association in this country. Wilson is a friggin' Oscarologist. Wilson knows better. That's all I can tell you. So I'm calling you out, Wilson Morales. You know better than that. And plus, you're my man, so that's what we do. All right, so we're going to do something different today, Wilson. Wilson, normally I bring you on first, and we basically have you discuss what's going on in Hollywood. If you want to do about 5 minutes, man, of some current events, we can do it. But I want to get right into talking about this year, this weekend of these films. But I want to tie it into the year at large to tell people at home that I know I haven't said it a lot. I know Wilson has written about it. TT has talked about it. Charles and I have shared it on the air. This has been a historic year for Black film. Historic. I'm not talking 91. I'm not talking 2014. But we're going to get into that in a minute. Wilson, what do you got on entertainment before we dive into the subject of subjects today?
Well, this is the MLK weekend, and normally in the month of January, you get a lot of movies that studios like to dump, get it out of the way, because we're still talking about movies that's going to be there are Oscar contenders. But because of COVID and everything got pushed back to 2021, this year is going to have a slew of films that there's no weekend you could just dump movies on. And so this particular weekend, you've got One Night in Miami, you've got American Skin, you've got Outside the Wire with Anthony Mackie and Damson Idris. You've got the MLK FBI documentary directed by Sam Pollard. You know, you've got a slew of films. You got Lockdown, which stars Chiwetel Ejiofor and Anne Hathaway, that's playing on HBO Max. So there's a number of options for anybody, especially since we're all home and watching stuff on streaming channels, that there are no dump movies because everybody's on the same playing field. You know, no movie is going to make more than the other because no one's going to the theaters. So, and I'm sure everybody has got Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime and so forth. So it's a matter of now people finding them. As you mentioned, you know, 2020 was a historic year for Black filmmakers in the standpoint that you had more films, and I haven't done the numbers yet, but we had more Black filmmakers have their films released in select theaters and in streaming platforms than anyone else, than any other year, in which, because you're not worried about the box office, everybody had a chance to see these movies. You know, specifically Black women directors. We had a good amount of them than ever before. And so in years past, when you would have a Wonder Woman 1984 in 4,000 theaters and a Numa Poirier's movie Jezebel in like 10 theaters, here, everybody's on the same plane. You know, and so you have your options of what to see. And now all you have to do is worry about whether or not your film is good. As you mentioned earlier at the top of the show, you know, the little things, Denzel, Rami, Jared, you don't care about the plot. The talent alone is gonna bring you in. You know, the talent alone is gonna bring you in. Then you see the movie, then you have another opinion. With 2020, you had a number of films where, granted, obviously a bigger name is gonna be a sell, but the story, if it's good enough, it's going to have a bigger effect and people will start catching up on it. That you don't have to worry about like, oh, I don't have the time, I don't have the money. No, you can go back and watch a movie that you heard about in December, but came out in June, like a Miss Juneteenth, you know, or a 40-year-old version, you know, or the 24th, you know. The year's still not over. We're still giving accolades to films of last year, since the goalpost has moved for a lot of awards to at least March and April. You know,
right,
so
well, stop right there, Wilson. Stop right there.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, wait, hold on a second. Yes, Sam, it's me. I'll let him know. All right, Wilson, thanks. He said his last name is Sam Pollard. You called him Sam Pollard or whatever it is. So
Pollard, okay.
So that's number one. Number two, I want you, Wilson, and I really, really want to emphasize this with TT and Charles and you. When we say this is a historic year, I'm a film nerd and a historian, right? Now, when we first got into the game, 1991 was our standard. There were like 19 films that year, that had Black and Hispanic directors. We were talking films like Boys in the Hood, New Jack City, Daughters of the Dust, the Matty Rich movie, Straight Outta Brooklyn, all of these movies that came out. And then we had another watershed year in 2014 when we, of course it was, this is the year before Selma. So this is like The Butler. Help me, man.
You had
you guys watch
you had The Butler,
what I'm talking about? 12 Years Slave. Mandela, yeah, that movie.
Fruitvale Station.
Right. So, but what I want to say, and I know Wilson had talked about it, he and I have talked privately about it, and then on this show, I really haven't done a good job because I was waiting, as you said, the goalposts had moved this year until the end. Is it the end of February that the film year goes this year?
The last date for a film to be considered for Oscar is February 28th.
Okay, so the end of February. Mm-hmm. So, now we've talked about some of the films that opened in this week, but you still have Judas and the Black Messiah. That is a movie that's going to be coming out. You got Malcolm and Marie that's going to be coming out. So there's still more films that are
United
going
States
to be
versus
released.
Billie Holiday.
United States versus Billie
Right.
Holiday. So this year is just nuts. And I want people at home who are watching us right now to really think about this. The biggest change, and I think TT and I don't know if we talked about this yesterday when you and I were on the phone, but the biggest change I've seen happen across the last 2 decades of doing this job is that there was a time that we would see stories that we thought were our stories, right? There would be these Black films that would be told from a white viewpoint, and you'd have like the white man that would be in there that they would strategically place in there to kind of balance the story out for white folks. So our stories weren't really told through our prism, our perspective. And now it seems that we have all the stories that are about us for the most part. I would say maybe 90% of the stories now are all told by Black storytellers, creatives, folks who are writing, directing, and telling these stories. Now, again, I'll start with that. Is that the biggest difference? Am I correct in that? Or have you guys seen another difference that's larger than that?
No, you're probably right. Before it was about quantity. Now it's about quality. So now, actually now we're getting both. Now, last year represented quantity and quality. With 1991, it was about quantity. It was just about getting our stories out there. Before, people just worked on the Black exploitation films, and we had to deal with that. And then, Spike was just starting to come out. But in 1991, which is 30 years, is it 30 years this year?
Oh yeah, 30 years.
30 years this year. You had, to my recollection, you had 17 films directed by Black directors. 17. I'm not including the Latino directors.
Are you talking about 1991?
Talking about 1991.
Oh yeah. And I had the pleasure of, well, I'm not gonna call it pleasure.
You had Raging Harlem, Bill Duke. You had a Raging Harlem, Bill Duke.
Oh, yeah.
Talking After Dark.
Talking Dirty After Dark. Did you ever see Perfume in 1991?
No, I didn't see that one.
That was one of the films. Perfume.
You had
what was the Ron O'Neal movie? Up Against the Wall or something like that. I think There was some really bad movies in 1991. I mean, don't get it twisted. There was some historic. It was a historic year, but all of those movies.
You had Jungle Fever.
Jungle Fever.
Yeah, Jungle Fever. Strictly Business. So there were a number of them. Some of them are obviously films that we still talk about, New Jack City and stuff. And some of them are like, oh, okay, I remember that. Like no one really talks about Strictly Business, like that. He had a good run for a while.
After Dark or Perfume. Yeah, y'all ain't talking about those.
But nevertheless, so then you look at last year, because of the pandemic, and we're all home, it was easy to promote a lot of the smaller films because they were getting streaming platform. So when you have a film like Miss Juneteenth that had it just played in theaters, would have had a quick death. If you played it at a time when a big film is playing in 4,000 screens and the media takes over about like, oh, it's #1, it broke this record. And then, no one really talks about how the independent films do, unless you're shattering records, unless you're saying, oh, for a movie that played in 5 theaters, it grossed this amount of much money. Unless you're getting those stories, those movies go by the wayside. But in 2020, we were able to talk about the smaller films. And even in October, you had movies like Spell, a horror movie, Black director starring Omari Hardwick. Don't Look Back. Another horror film, Black director, created by the guy who created Final Destination. You had the 40-year-old version. Movies that wouldn't necessarily get the theater amount of screens.
Right.
But since it's on Netflix and it's on Amazon, everybody can catch up to it at some point or another. As opposed to like when you're in the theaters, once the word goes out, how theaters go, movies are in theaters. You have 1 to 2 weeks to make your mark.
Right.
By the 3rd week, you just now go down. What's the next big thing? And so when you look at 2020, and I'm going to put out a list as far as movies that are coming out this year, you're going to get a lot more high-profile films as opposed to 2020. We had a lot more independent films,
right.
Because a lot more high-profile films got pushed to 2021.
Right.
I think you're going to get less directors, because I don't, from what I've seen, not a lot. The upcoming
this thing goes. These things call in ebbs and flows, man. I remember you and I. We talked about 2018 when you had Black Panther and all those huge films, and then 2019 it sort of kind of went down, and then it rebounded again in 2021. So in 2022, I anticipate it's almost now becoming like an every other year sort of phenomenon as it relates to how much work you can actually produce. But TT, go ahead on and answer the same question, man. What are you noticing the biggest difference, man, over the last 20 years, as well as where we are right now and the historic year that was 2020?
I want to piggyback, but go on in a different direction with what Wilson was saying, because I totally agree with the idea of the films themselves and what's coming out. But I also feel like 2020 changed things. And again, I'm speaking of this from probably a strictly personal, professional kind of situation. I went from doing Fox 19 one day a week, where it's Friday, you're talking about an opening weekend, and I'm in a market where the idea of the coverage was just really based on what's going to be opening at the multiplex. If I wanted to cover an independent film, that would spark a conversation that I'd have to have with the producers of the morning segment. And sometimes it would be a conversation I would have to start a couple of weeks in advance if I wanted to get that conversation going about an independent film.
Right.
But by March 20th of 2020, when we hit lockdown, everything shuts down, all of a sudden the station came to me and they're like, okay, here's the deal. We got to cover, we need content. So why don't you come on 5 mornings a week and just talk about whatever you want to talk about, whatever you're streaming, whatever, So that became the situation where not only was it the idea that films weren't fighting against those bigger films in theaters, but there was also a chance now for the coverage to actually get out there too.
Excuse me, were they paying you every day that you were coming on there?
Dude, they don't pay me at all.
Okay, well, never mind, man. Go ahead.
They don't pay me at all.
Look, I do this. Wilson's face. Wilson was like 5 days a week. Woo, in New York? Woo.
Yeah. No, first of all, remember, we're in Cincinnati, and that's not happening. I've never been paid, but I make sure that I get other things out of it. It's all part of the hustle and the grind. So that's what I'm doing. But like I said, that's the thing. When it went to 5 days a week, it gave me the opportunity. They were kind of like, you know what, we don't care. You can talk about whatever you want to talk about, which then meant that I had the whole playbook open, which was like, okay, I can talk about whatever I want to talk about. So yeah, Miss Juneteenth got talked about one whole morning all by itself, which it would not have gotten that in an ordinary year. The 40-year-old version got coverage on the equal standing with anything else that was going to be opening within that 2-week window. That's the thing that's really exciting and that's changing things from my perspective. And again, that's probably not happening everywhere around the country, but I get the feeling that there are probably more stations than not that were probably feeling the same kind of crunch that Fox 19 was feeling here, that all of a sudden it was like, we do need that coverage. Let's just open it up and see what happens. And again, I've gone every week, and usually, as a matter of fact, I'm gonna submit my schedule for next week tomorrow morning. Every week I do it, I'm always kind of like, well, sooner or later they're gonna be like, we don't really need this anymore, but it hasn't happened yet.
And guess what? And you keep on milking it as long as you can.
And that's the thing. And again, as part of milking it, like I said, that means that I make sure that let's see what's coming out. Let's see what I want to cover. Let's see what I want to make sure that people in the community are going to be talking about. Plus, I get the added benefit, and I told you this yesterday, not only do I get to cover this stuff, but then because of quarantine, I get to walk around my downtown neighborhood with my mask on and everything else, but people now recognize me in the street, and I know that people are checking the stuff out because people are telling me that they're checking it out.
Right.
They saw the 40-year-old version. They saw Miss Juneteenth, and they'll tell me about it when they see me in the street. They're like, hey, yeah, I saw that. I'm glad you talked about it. So that means that I know that the community's out there, they're seeing it, they're talking about it, and that opens the door for me to make sure that when I go back to Fox 19 each week, I can say, hey, I got a good response about this right here, or we got a great response about, you know, whatever the film or the subject is, which then means that, again, once we get past all of this and get back to some sense of normalcy, that strengthens my hand to make sure that I can make an argument to them that, okay, once we get back to whatever maybe 2022 is going to look like, I can go back to them and say, okay, we need to renegotiate this idea. If I go back to once a week, you got to let me cover some more stuff. You got to let me cover whatever I want to cover, because I found an audience out there that wants to hear about these films.
Absolutely.
So
and
it's our responsibility to cover
there.
it.
Look, they were
Right.
always out there, TT, you know, but the stations have not been open, and it took a pandemic in order for them to get them to expand what it is they wanted, because they needed content.
Right.
But before I go to Charles, I love Wilson to death. That is one of my oldest film friends, and I want him to really look good on this show. Wilson, can you center yourself on that screen, because it is driving me crazy that you are tilted to the left. Get to the center, man.
Is this good enough?
Anybody? Is that center enough, everybody?
Yeah, that's it.
I'm right in the center.
All right. Well, no, you were not in the center, brother, but it's okay. Charles Kirkland, go ahead. I just had to tell Wilson that, because it just drives me crazy. Like, go ahead, man. Go ahead. Oh, I see what you're doing, Charles. Go ahead.
You know, you do have a chat button in your thing. We could just say, hey.
No. It's fun to just scream at you, man. But go ahead.
So I guess the question for me, I mean, what I'm looking at is, and Wilson kind of mentioned it before, a lot of these independent films have such a small window to work in the past, and now that the window is enlarged and people can see them and they have equal footing as other films do, I'm concerned about how that's going to be going into this year's. I mean, a lot of things are going to be the same. Hopefully, you know, and just as we talked at the beginning of the show, we got so many films this week that we're talking about that are now on the radar of everyone, man. Where would we have talked about MLK FBI before? I mean, we may have spoken about it, but I mean, we can actually have discussions about a movie of this nature now, because it's incredible how much these films are getting seen and talked about. And so I can't say too much more, because everyone else has said the same thing, but I'm encouraged that now people are going to see different stories and may be requesting different stories in the future that the mainstream Hollywood has been producing.
All right, so before we start talking about the slate of films this weekend, I just want to go back one more time. Wilson, I know, talked about Kevin Wilmot's The 24th, which is a movie that I think a lot of people slept on. I cannot believe that David Talbot didn't get any love yet with Jingle Jangle, A Christmas Journey, which I thought was one of the most...
No one thinks of these Christmas movies
as movies, but man, that was such a great effort from David Talbot.
Here's the thing. Netflix is an anomaly, because they're giving everybody the money that they need to make the films that they want.
Not everybody. Look, not everybody.
Here's the thing.
Look, and Kevin, I mean, not Kevin. Charles knows where I'm getting ready to go with that, but go ahead, man. Not everybody.
Well, think about it. Like, who else will put up the money for Scorsese to, you know, de-age the actors? You know, who else is going to give Spike Lee? Here's the thing. Spike Lee doesn't have a track record. Well, hear me out. Spike Lee does not have a track record as far as bringing in box office money for his movies. But yet Netflix was like, okay, we're going to have you, or you want to shoot in Cambodia, Vietnam, wherever it is. It's like, okay, instead of creating a backlot in somewhere in Hollywood and so forth. You know, you look at Gina Prince Power. All of these directors who I spoke to last year regarding the films that they had released in 2020, they all praised Netflix for giving them the money and leaving them alone to create the vision that they did. Let's wait to see David Talbot's next film and look at the difference.
Charles and I both have our hand up, because we know that Spike couldn't get the money to hire 4 younger actors, which is why those flashbacks look crazy in The Five Bloods. Now, I mean, we made it work. Look, we made it work. But it was funny, because when David E. Talbot was talking about all the money he got for Jingle Jangle, Spike was like, hey, where's my Five Bloods money at?
throughout time, you're gonna hear Spike give you a different answer. You know, Spike would say that he didn't want to de-age those guys because he wanted those guys to stand out. You know, like at some point or another, you know, Spike, we'll give you $1 million if you change your answer.
But you know, I was gonna say that's a lot of spin that Spike put on the. I'm sure that he would have preferred to have 4 young brothers that he could put in that film to play the younger version.
Opposite Chadwick Boseman. Yep.
Right, because he's all about bringing up the next generation. I know that he probably would have had 4 guys and said, "Hey, play this role," and if he was given the amount of money that he needed to do.
But it probably would have taken away from the 4 leads. It probably would have taken from the 4 leads, and it'd be 2 different stories because you'd be focusing on the 4 young actors along with Chadwick, you know, and then Chadwick would come back because, as we know, his character is dead, along with the older actors. And the question is,
so you said you said them take away kind of like when Madeline Mills was young, and then Felicia Rashad was her in Jingle Jangle? You mean take away like that?
It's, like I said, Christmas movies are looked at differently.
All right, whoa. Let me just step in
we're messing with Wilson, man.
Let me step in as a mediator here because I'm listening to both sides of this, and the funny thing is I'm hearing and understanding both sides really well because I guarantee you Spike got more to do to Five Bloods than he's gotten from almost anything else.
Oh, I would agree.
So on some level, it is the idea that Netflix was kind of like, well, okay, we're going to open up the coffers for you because they've been open up the coffers for just about everybody. So they gave him an opportunity. I think the question then becomes, did he not ask for enough or whatever?
And that's what
happened in there.
So you saying Spike mismanaged the budget that we didn't leave?
No, I'm not.
I'm
not saying that. I'm just saying that maybe he wasn't. Maybe there was some question in there about, well, gosh, are they really opening it up? And then he was like, okay, well, maybe I didn't get as much as I needed, so I can come up with a way to make it work.
Right.
Yeah.
You want 4 more actors? You can't go to Vietnam to shoot. You gotta shoot back.
There are going to be those kinds of questions, yeah, based on what they gave him up front. So I don't know.
That's why I love bringing my friends who are like folks I respect on to talk about this, because we talk about issues that people are thinking at home, because people kept blowing me up, and I'm sure they blew you up too. Why would those flashback scenes look ridiculous in this movie? I say, hey man, I know. I'll try to find an answer and get it to you. So enough of Spike Lee and the Five Bloods. Oh, the other film I wanted to talk about, because we talked about a little bit about the 24th. We talked about Jingle Jangle. Is Sylvie's Love by Eugene Ash. My God, man. I mean, Wilson, you saw me put it on the list twice last night for BFCC. I love that movie, and I love that it wasn't about race. It was just a romance.
What pisses me off is that Amazon is not treating this as a movie to promote for the Oscars. They're promoting it for the Emmys.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what, you know, like I don't know all of the Emmy rules, but it's hard to put a movie out in December and still be, even though it'll still qualify, for people to think back when it comes time for the Emmy voters. You know, no one's gonna, you know, because then you have to remind everybody, people are gonna think, that came out in 2020.
Yeah, I don't understand the decision to make it a television movie. When it played at Sundance, it was a film festival film. So I'm like, why are you pigeonholing it as a TV film when we see it as a film? And the same thing with Small Acts. I mean, I thought what the LA Film Critics did was heroic, and I wish my Film Critic Association would do it and make Small Acts by Steve McQueen, to me, is just masterful. That this brother dropped 5 movies, people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 movies at once, and put them in a series. I thought that was amazing this year. I really did.
Well, I will say this. He dropped 1 movie and 5 shorts, because all the other ones may have been about an hour in length. The only one that was really over an hour was the first one, in Mangrove. But again, it was all quality work, and if you had put them all together in one film, I mean, it'd be outstanding. But you know, that's just me.
All right. Okay, so let's get this weekend started, man. Who here has seen MLK FBI? All right, TT, just sit there, man, and just kind of learn something here.
I am. I'm ready.
Of course, again, and I just want to let you know, excuse me, producer, do I have any paper in front of me? Because Charles always accuses me of trying to set them up like I got all this hidden knowledge. I'm like, dude, I know this stuff. This film, of course, is a documentary, and this is one of several MLK documentaries, which I find to be interesting because outside of Selma, and I think there was the TV movie King with Paul Winfield back in 1978, we don't really make a lot of films about Martin Luther King. Like we had Malcolm X. We've never had like a Martin Luther King film outside of Selma, I guess.
Well, you got Selma, you've got Boycott. You're saying,
well,
right?
But Boycott was a HBO movie. I'm talking about theatrical releases, Wilson. That's what I'm saying.
You've had a couple of MLK documentaries, which is what MLK.
But I was setting it up by getting ready to get to that. But I'm saying they've given us more quality MLK docs than they've given us quality MLK theatrical releases. That's why I was going with this. So, I'm not sure how many of you guys saw King in the Wilderness, which I saw at Sundance several years ago, about the last 2 years of his life. I'm trying to think if there's any other MLK doc that I'm missing, but this latest one I found to be really interesting because we've known now over the course of the last 40, almost 50 years about the COINTELPRO program that J. Edgar Hoover authorized at the FBI that spied on people like Dr. King, of course, Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, Fred Hampton, so many other folk. And in this film, it really goes into detail. That's what Sam Pollard does, is he really delves into the investigation and how the FBI really went after Dr. King and some of the insidious methods of them trying to kind of bring him down and trying to prevent, as we saw also in Judas and the Black Messiah, the prevention of the rise of a Black Messiah or a Black person who will unite the African Americans. I thought that this film, was really, really well done. And of course, I don't know where they keep finding it, TT, Wilson, and Charles, this footage that had never been seen before. Like I didn't see it on Eyes on the Prize 1 or 2. I didn't see it in King in the Wilderness. Where are you finding all this hidden footage that they keep using to make these documentaries? So I thought in that regard that Sam Pollard did a good job. What, Wilson, Charles, what are you guys thinking?
I concur. I believe that, and I think Pollard mentioned it a lot of times, that there's a lot of stuff out there that's still to come, especially when the FBI file gets released.
What is that, in 2027, I think they said?
27, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff that's still out there that people have hold on to for whatever reason that we just haven't seen before. So I think his angle in this was a lot different than any other angle as well, in that, he's coming at from where the FBI is attacking him and how J. Edgar Hoover just did not like Martin Luther King and was trying to undermine his authority with all the things that he was doing. So it was also a different spin. So you needed some different footage, but where he got it from, I'm not sure. How he did it is masterful. I mean, it's a very compelling piece of work.
Wilson,
Sam Pollard, it never ceases to amaze me with what he does, and obviously he's a documentarian who knows what we've seen already. And he wasn't going to show, obviously, and when you say, like, how come we don't see that many films about Martin Luther King? Because I think throughout the years, I think there is a lot we've already know. Like what's going to entice an audience to see what we've known forever. Every year, every January, every April, a documentary is only, his own words. You don't need an actor. You just need the real thing. And for him to grab this footage and put in the time, and you got to always remember that when you do a documentary, there's stuff that you're leaving out. So the challenge is the editing room was like, look at all this material I have, and I got to make it into a 2-hour movie, and I got to cut like 3 hours. Like if they heard this or if they saw that. So like, it's always interesting because when you get these new documentaries, as you mentioned, the Sundance film that came out a couple of years ago on this, if you just paid attention and you looked at all of them, you just know enough about Martin Luther King, from different angles, from the man himself, from the FBI perspective, from the witnesses around him. It's like, you don't want to see a movie because it's like, oh, we've been here, done that. It's like, we already know what the end outcome is come April, so we know these stories, so like, I think when you watch it now, I don't think anyone's dealt with the FBI perspective, and the funny enough is, like, you're going to have 3 films within the next 2 months, January and February, where they're detailing how the FBI wanted to infiltrate the Black community. MLK is one of them. Billie Holiday is another. And then you have Judas and the Black Messiah, And so I don't think, we've seen these stories of the Black, I guess, I don't know if I'm wrong in saying it, traitors, who agreed to take money from the FBI, to tell, to just tell stories about, oh, this is where you can find them, or this is what they're doing, because they certainly didn't have anybody in there, And so, like, that's the story right there, as far as that perspective, like, why do you think they did it,
Right.
So,
all right. So we're in agreement on that one. And I want to move on to this next film, which I've talked to folks who are close to me. And like, I love Nate Parker. I got a chance to talk to him this week. I know Wilson had a chance. TT, did you get a chance to talk to Nate?
I did not, no.
All right, yeah. So had a chance to have a nice discussion with Nate about American Skin. I think the issue with American Skin, which makes it effective, but at the same time takes away or blunts its effectiveness, is that when I talked to him and explained to him that, 2 years ago when this film debuted at the Venice Film Festival, he brought Spike Lee over, and there were a lot of critics that I really think, and I'll just call it what it is, they were white critics who just didn't get or understand what Nate Parker was the story he was trying to tell with this film. And I think 2 years later, after we watched this Summer of Discontentment, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many other Black folks who needlessly lost their lives, here comes this story about a father who is with his child, which starts similar to Queen and Slim. You're out riding, you get pulled over by law enforcement, a skirmish ensues. In this case, he wants to videotape the police officer, is shot and killed, and the father is waiting for justice. And when justice doesn't come, he takes matters into his own hands, which is probably as much as I want to say about the film. But from everybody that I've talked to, that I've recommended the film to, each one of them have come to me individually and were like, I got a son at home. I'm not really trying to watch that. I can watch CNN and see that story. It happens every day, all day. And I said, well, it's true. But I think I applaud Nate Parker, because I think that what the types of films that he makes now are really these socially conscious stories that really try to hold a mirror up to the audience's face and go, hey man, this is racism. This is what's going on in the world. So I applaud him for that. TT, Wilson, I know you saw American Skin. Did TT, Charles, did you guys see it?
No.
Okay. Yeah, well, Wilson, what are you thinking about? But go ahead.
I thought.
Wait, hold on a second. Let Charles in, because Charles had something.
But I'll say this. I think Nate Parker is, like you said, we've seen this story before so many times, so this movie isn't for us. It may be about us, but it's not for us. And
the audience it's for, do you think they're going to watch it, though? I think that's the key. Wilson? Wilson?
Vanessa Bell Calloway, who's in the movie, and I spoke to her, she said Nate Parker has created a what-if film. And as you mentioned, Charles, we've seen these stories, these vigilante type of stories, like I want to get justice on my own because it's not happening. Whether it be a commercial film, a comical film, a dramatic film, we've seen these things, Dog Day Afternoon type of movies, but Nate wants to put it into real life context, and it's extreme to some extent. What he did with the movie, the plot of the movie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when the movie first played at a festival, the Venice Film Festival 2 years ago, IndieWire was the first out there to review it, and they gave it an F. An F is extreme. An F basically says you have no business being in this business, you know? And having seen the film 2 weeks ago, 2 years later, I thought that was pretty extreme for them to say, to give it an F. You know, the movie's not perfect. It's not an A. And I'd probably give it somewhere between a C+ and a B, but it's certainly not
far from an F.
You know, you're talking Ed Wood, you're talking a lot more films that just like are horrible. At one point, you're watching this movie and you're saying, okay, I've been down this rabbit hole before. You know, it's like, okay, there's no point where you're saying, I'm leaving. I can't take any more of this. This bad act. That's like the acting's on.
There are critics at Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, and Deadline who have an axe to grind, and I'm not gonna throw names out. All you got to do is Google. If you don't like a filmmaker, you don't like a filmmaker. But the fact that you don't like a filmmaker does not give you. I'll give you a good example. You know, for years on this show, I was not the biggest fan of Tyler Perry's films, but I would never just arbitrarily just get on the air with, you know, and see one and go, it's horrible. I would say, okay, I'll explain to you, Charles. I mean, am I telling the truth? I would at least try to explain these are the areas that bothered me about the film. But it seems like, and Wilson, I'm going to give it back to you in a second. It seems like there are folks who have vendettas against him. And Wilson and I, it's funny because Wilson was the first person I talked to when all of this stuff with Nate Parker exploded. Remember that Friday, Wilson, you and I on the phone? And you said to me, man, this isn't good. I said, man, I know.
Well, here's the thing. They were trying to set him up.
They were. They didn't try, Wilson. They did.
They did.
Because
they did.
we found out that they had the information in February, and they waited until like the third week in August, like 6 weeks before the release of Birth of a Nation, to
before he got
stuff.
The onslaught.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Buzz. And, you know, like I said, you know, going back and said, listen, normally you get these type of stories coming out when a guy's already a contender and you have to find a way to knock him down a bit. They wanted him. It's almost like a Terminator thing. Like it's like a Terminator movie. Like get him before he's born. Don't get him. Don't kill him.
Right.
Let's get him before he's born. You know what I'm saying? So like before he even gets that buzz, like no, knock him out of the box right now. You know, you're not going to go after the legacy of Nat Turner. You're going after Nate Parker, and you're going after a story that's like over 10 years old. And now you're just bringing it up when it was always on his Wikipedia page. So they're lumping him to these other individuals out there who have also been, you know, castigated by the media, you know, trial by media, trial by Twitter, you know, and they put it out there so that when you read it from them, and the sad thing is that they weren't enough, I guess, black press to tell Nate's side of the story, you know, and granted, I could probably say he didn't have his first response was probably not his best response.
No, his first, second, and third responses were not his best responses. I mean, so wait a minute. I'm gonna end this, Wilson, because I don't want none of us to get in trouble. But I'm just gonna say, for the umpteenth time, I was in the room. I was at the Eccles Theater when Birth of a Nation premiered, and for all of these journalists now who have an axe to grind, you were there. You praised this movie. This movie sold for $17.5 million.
It's funny enough. You called me, and this is a funny story. When you called me, I was on a JetBlue plane.
Yep.
And talking to you, and that's when I realized, wait a minute, how am I talking to on a plane? Because JetBlue.
You got WhatsApp, right?
Yeah, because JetBlue has free Wi-Fi.
Right.
That you're able to make phone calls through your WhatsApp. And I'm in the corner, goes, yo, we're actually talking. And we're going through, you know, we're way up in the air. I'm like,
dude, I just left the auditorium and they went crazy for this movie. They went crazy. This I'm not gonna say it would have won the Oscar for Best Picture. It sure enough would have got nominated had you not had all this.
But it would have been in the conversation. Here's the thing, you know, as somebody who talks about the Oscars and writes about these things, you know, there's a game of politics. You know, it's like a wag the dog type of, that if you get the right person to say this, everybody else will follow. You know, it's almost like today's politics. If Mitch McConnell says, okay, we're gonna impeach, half those Republicans will follow him. If the right press person out there says Nate Parker is going to win and he's the biggest voice in the room, a lot more people will take heed to that. Even now, there are some people who have the reputation that, like, you don't sight unseen, they're in the race. 2 years ago, we knew when The Irishman was being made, they were going to get a nomination without us seeing the movie. You knew Scorsese was in. You knew De Niro was in.
Before we saw the movie,
Pacino was in. It's like they were in. There are certain people that have that Oscar pedigree. They come in there like Tiger Woods. Oh, he's in. Can he win? That's a whole different story. So with Nate Parker, who's never been seen on a national level, even though the Black community has always known who he was, he's brand new to them. And so now they're writing these stories about him. Oh, did you know this? It's like, when are you bringing up somebody's past from 15 years ago? But there was a mandate. But not to take away, I think American Skin is worth seeing, for you to decide your own thing. You have your own opinion. If you are a critic, you need to see the movie as is. And don't go in there thinking like, oh, who Nate Parker is. See the movie for what it is. And then make your decision whether or not you like it. That's what I tell everybody. Don't think about the guy, because as it is right now, before we were critics, we watched movies. We never thought about who wrote it, who directed it. For all of us who didn't have the money to go to the theaters on a regular basis, you're watching these movies on TV. These are the movies you remember because you watched it on TV, and you never paid attention to the credits because you just changed the channel afterwards.
All right, y'all.
So
we got 10 minutes on this last movie, which I really want to talk about, which is why I told TT and Charles, we done with American Skin.
Hey Tim, can you bear with me for like 30 seconds while I step out for don't
no, step off, man. Step off. I'm not gonna put you on blast, man. Go ahead.
Okay, just give me 30 seconds.
Our final film that I want to discuss this weekend, I needless to say, it's the best one. I had it number one on my list this year, is One Night in Miami. One Night in Miami, if you haven't had an opportunity to see the film, is a fictional account. I want people to understand this because I'm not sure if this actually happened the way it happened, but according to Kent Powers and his stage play, the night Muhammad Ali wins the heavyweight championship back at the Hampton Inn, or I think it was called the Hampton Inn, he, Jim Brown, Sam Cooke, and Malcolm X all converged for an evening of discussion. And rewatching the film on Friday, what I enjoyed so much about One Night in Miami is that you see these groups of friends, and you notice in these conversations, if you watch the movie, that they normally pair them off. So you get Jim Brown having moments with Muhammad Ali. You get Sam Cooke Malcolm X going after Sam Cooke. You get, all of these different stories. And the way that I thought Kent Powers' screenplay really works well, and Regina King's direction, is how they introduce each character, right? So you see Muhammad Ali, fighting Henry Cooper. So that's our introduction to him. Malcolm X's introduction, of course, is, him down trying to do what he's doing. He's got all of these things in the back of his mind, which we find out once you watch the film. Jim Brown's introduction, which I interviewed Aldous Hodge earlier this week. I thought that was the coldest one, where he's just sitting there like, hey, man, can I help you out? Oh, man, we don't allow ends in the house. Wait a minute, what? Just so casual with his racism. And, of course, the introduction of Sam Cooke with this Copacabana set that really does not work. And how, and before I throw it to you guys, the dynamic, I think it's that driving force between the two of them, which I think really powers this film. And, which we say iron sharpens iron, or, you squeeze coal enough to make diamonds. That's how you get a change is going to come, which I think is powerfully done. Leslie Odom Jr., Aldous Hodge. How do you pronounce this brother's name? Is it Kingston Benadir?
Kingsley Benadir.
Kingsley Benadir and Eli Gorey. Bravo to all you brothers. Regina King in her directorial debut. I love Regina King anyway. If you watch this show, I've had a chance to kind of interview her several times. Wilson, we saw her last year or at the Critics' Choice Awards. We love Regina King. But now, director Regina King? Man. TT, since you have not had a lot to say since you were film absent on the first two, we will let you lead off. Go ahead, brother. What do you think about this film?
I mean, I have to say, and I told you this when we talked yesterday, I covered this yesterday morning on Fox 19. And what I talked about, and again, I think what is really interesting for our conversation right now, yes, you've already said you feel like this was the best of these films that we're talking about now. I think this is also the perfect weekend to talk about it because, yes, the film focuses on those four iconic figures. But in my mind, as I was watching it, King was kind of hovering over this as well. He was the fifth Beatle, if you will, that wasn't really there with them as this was taking place. And for audiences to have the chance to see it this weekend leading into Monday, again, like that's what we need to have more of these conversations. We need to have people kind of recognizing that, again, whether we're talking about the veracity of what actually happened in that room or between those men, I don't think that shouldn't matter. Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about for this film to work is, does it capture the spirit of the times, and does it capture the spirit of these men? And I think in each case, it does both of those things incredibly well. We don't have nearly, at least on the critical level, we don't have nearly as many conversations about the idea of, how accurate films are that are dealing with broader mainstream kind of issues. When we're talking about, the Declaration of Independence or the Civil War, if you're getting a Lincoln story, no one's nitpicking about what Lincoln was doing or what he was saying in a particular moment in the same way that we normally get those kind of nitpicky comments when it's our stories. So at this stage, I'm like, we need to get over that because, again, they are very upfront about the idea that, as you were upfront about it and introducing it here now, it's a fictional take on what may have happened. It's a what if kind of story. But again, if you're going to go into those what ifs, like I said, the only thing that matters again is does it capture the spirit? And I feel like at the end of the day, I got the spirit of each one of those men in some ways, shadings and things that we've never gotten when we've seen them portrayed in other stories by other people.
And that's like exactly where I was headed, TT. Before I get to Wilson and Charles, in my head, I had this fantasy. I said, man, if I could go back and figure out how to remix it, to take Denzel Washington and have him play Kingsley's role, and have, originally be Malcolm, and have Will Smith come back and play Eli Goray's role, I was like, I've been sitting there like this for 2 hours, like, give me this movie.
Yeah, you're right. If you get David, we haven't had anybody play.
We haven't had anybody play Sam Cooke or Jim Brown on screen, so that's why I'm focused on that. But go ahead and give me. We got about 8 minutes or 7 minutes, Wilson. So you know how you do, man. You got to give Charles some room to breathe.
The minute I heard Regina King was going to make this movie, I was like, holy cow, And she chose a number of actors who are not huge, at least not on a national level. Leslie because Hamilton was released to a national audience this past July, a lot more people got to know who Leslie is. Otherwise, he's just a guy who won a Tony Award, and he hasn't had a big movie to date outside of maybe being in Harriet. We've known Aldous Hodge, but not on a national level because, he was one of the guys in Straight Outta Compton, but he was not the bigger known name from that group. Eli Gorey, no one really knows who he is. Now, also, we're pressed. I've seen his work before on TV, and he also was featured in Race, the track movie.
The Jesse Owens movie,
about Jesse Owens. And then Kingsley Ben-Adir, he's also new on the film front. So it was good of her to get these individuals where the names are going to stand out are Muhammad Ali, Sam Cooke, and so forth, as opposed to getting some big famous names where it's all about these guys playing these guys, as opposed to, Muhammad Ali is being played by so-and-so. And so when you watch the movies, you're watching the persona as opposed to the actor.
Right.
And that's what stood out, and she knows, and it's hard to make a setting work, you know, because people have their, you know, when you think about what Denzel did for Fences, you know, and they said, oh, it's hard to get nominated when you're doing a movie that's based on a play. And in the settings for this movie, you know, there's not a lot. It's just one hotel and mostly in a room, and then you go outside. But the dialogue makes it work. You know, when each one of these guys are having their one-on-one conversation, you know, with Sam Cooke and Muhammad Ali, with Jim Brown and Malcolm X, you know, and then you're paying attention. You know, you're actually paying attention to this dialogue to see, especially when it's a what if. You know, again, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that where this is the week of the what if. What if we took back, you know, we went after the cops that were found innocent. What if Malcolm and so met this week, you know? So, you know, it's you know, you rather have it on cinema, you know, as a thought process, as opposed to like having a deep, long 8-hour conversation. Like, well, what if this could have happened then or not? But for her directorial debut for the screen, I think she's done a great job. Obviously, people love Regina King. You know, she's highly ranked as far as getting a director nomination, you know, so we will see what happens. But I will be looking forward to see what the next project she's going to do.
Absolutely. Charles, you got the last word, man. You got about 4 minutes, man. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think much like how we talked about American Skin, I think the lens of the world has changed to make the film like this relevant now. And so whereas in the past it would have been like, oh yeah, these guys met, so whatever. But I think the discussions that they have such a relevance, not just to the time that they were in, but to the time that we're in right now, because we're running along those same parallels, that makes this performance, this film, so very important. I think when you talk about the dialogue, we had the trial of the Chicago 7 earlier this year, where I think the dialogue was so heavy and important in it that this was the only other movie that I thought the dialogue was better than, and which made it one of my best movies of the year as well. So I really appreciated, and also I appreciated looking at Malcolm X and seeing Malcolm X and not seeing an actor play Malcolm X, which is what we got when we had Denzel play Malcolm X. So he didn't look at all like Malcolm X, but I think Kingsley Ben-Adir, he looked like Malcolm X did. I think Eli Goree looked like Cassius Clay did. Leslie Odom looked like Sam Cooke.
He does. He does.
Yeah.
So it was great to see also that kind of context. Now I won't talk about Jim Brown because I'm not sure that Aldous looked a lot like Jim Brown.
I think he was close enough. I really do. I think he was close enough. Wilson was trying to show you the picture to go, yeah, he was close enough.
I was trying to find it, trying to put it together, but yeah. But you know, it's the lookness. You know, you don't have to be 100%, but the persona. You know, but the persona. You think about, you know, think about, you know, as you mentioned, what if she had, what if this was Denzel? Now you can't say Denzel because he's older now, you know. But what if this was, you know, if you can go back, you get a digitized Denzel, you get Will Smith, you're like, what? You know,
I was sitting there like,
you know.
But yeah, man. I mean, but let's bring it home, man. I mean, One Night in Miami is on Prime right now. I know, Wilson, you put it out on your social media platforms. TT, you talked about it on television. Charles has been sharing it. People, it's always funny to me when you know, we recommend movies, right? And 9 times out of 10, you know, they just ordinary movies. People may click on it or read. But when it's a movie like One Night in Miami, people start sending me comments. I'm like, dude, I didn't make the movie. I just recommended the movie to you. Don't give me the credit. Regina King, that's who did that, her and Kent Powers. And Kent Powers, let's talk about him in the last 30, 40 seconds. Soul and One Night in Miami in the same year.
I can't recall Black screenwriters having that good of a praise, you know, of films, you know, and we need more of him. You know, we need more Black screenwriters telling stories. It doesn't have to be these, but just Black screenwriters itself, you know, just getting these movies produced by studios to have the same fanfare that other screenwriters are getting.
All right.
You know?
So before we get out of here, man, TT, tell people where they can follow you, either on social media or on Fox 19, where they can listen and read your content.
Right. Well, at this stage, again, I'm only on Twitter, so it's at TT Stern-Enzi. You can reach me there. Otherwise, to be quite honest, I always tell everybody the easiest place to find me is my blog, which is terrencetodd.com. That's where I archive everything. So literally all of those weekly segments on Fox 19 end up there, any writing that I'm doing. And as a matter of fact, I've got a long form project that I'm getting ready to start working on, thanks to Arts Wave here in Cincinnati. This is looking at truth and reconciliation and my perspective and experience of being a Black critic. I'm going to have 5 long form essays, and I'm starting a podcast, and it's all going to be kind of wrapped through terrencetodd.com. That'll be the place to get all that content.
All right. Wilson Morales?
You can find me over at blackfilmandtv.com, which is where you'll see all stories from interviews to reviews to news as far as what's going on in the industry, because those are the same words. You can find me on Twitter and other social media outlets, blackfilmandtv.com.
Charles Kirkland Jr.
I'm writing at thefilmgordon.com, but you can check my musings at the DC Film Life. That's on Facebook and Twitter.
And of course, for me, I'm at thefilmgordon.com, FilmGordon on multiple platforms. You can watch this show all over the place. So it'll be out a little later on today on our YouTube channel. But I want to thank all 3 of you guys, man. I mean, you know how I feel about all you guys, man. We've known each other for years, respect the work. Wilson is a film don. Me and TT, we like the next level down.
We just hanging in there.
We just kind of do what we do. Because we don't live in New York. We don't live in New York, so you don't
need to be in New York right now.
You need to be in New York. Charles Kirkland is down here with us. As we tell you guys in closing every week, please see something good at the movies. You got plenty of good choices, and there's plenty more coming up in the ensuing weeks. Mm-hmm. You guys take care, enjoy, and we'll see you guys on the other side, man. Everybody enjoy your weekend, man, and just take care. All right?